fine. Don't worry about it. It's all right.
I've been working on my wrote a prescription now. Because tomorrow we're taking Joe, for a scan. So
just go on, tell us. Tell the world. Go on.
One of the ones that I have, so it's an ambulance this time, to take her in a chair because if she's out of falls all the time, we don't want to be responsible for her with a bloody little, frame and everything. So, we've got.
Bill, what we're going to do, we're going to put it on silent. I can't handle this.
She can have one escort because of the
Yeah, that's fine. I love it. Don't worry about it. It's all right. Good.
Right, start your 15-minute talk then.
Well, okay, I'm just setting this up now. Don't worry, Bill. We're fine. So we're gonna be following the line, looking at Motte and Bailey castles actually. And that's where we're going to be now. So we'll have just a short one. And Roger's going to be out of action for until January as well because he's doing a music type thingamajig. So he won't be doing the afternoon either. The next one either. So I'm just gonna crack on now. Have you ever tried getting hold of this book, Tim Ingold's book, The Line? Have you ever tried getting hold of it, Bill?
No, I haven't. No.
There's so much in this. So I'm just gonna put this on. Just doing one last thing, and we should be okay. Put that on mute. Bill, I was trying to say, what stands out in your mind in regards to Motte and Bailey castles?
We've been to a few. We know the standard layout of the Motte, the Bailey, the keep, etc.
Yeah.
Quite a few of them around. Some you can still follow, especially the Motte. The Baileys have quite often just disintegrated into nothing.
Now, you've actually... Yeah, go on, carry on.
Yeah, I think that's it really, Carl, the ones we've been to together. Signs of the Bailey seem to have disappeared. But the Motte, obviously, because of its very nature, is the one which has remained not a much reduced height and size maybe, but it's still there.
Yeah, so you would say that right, you know, a few weeks ago we used the word order and disorder in regards to Roman sites.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we look at an image, a standard image of a Motte and Bailey, right? Just obviously these are nice little Google ones. And right, typical Bill.
There we are then, yeah.
So okay.
Motte, keep, up to Bailey, yeah.
Right, okay. So can we presume that's sort of the stereotypical Motte and Bailey site, yeah?
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
Okay, okay. So now we've established that's the typical Motte and Bailey site, right? So if we follow the order of things, right? So we think about, so that's, would we sort of say that that's an ordered landscape?
Well, it's got to be, isn't it? It's obviously planned. It's defensive. It's got living and service quarters all around it. It's got some sort of, say, outer defensive line,
Yeah,
ditch or fence, etc. Yeah.
yeah.
Cardiff Castle, obviously, is a good example, isn't it?
No, that is a very good example, right? And maybe that's where we should pop onto next. So if we type in there now, we type in Cardiff. Hang on a minute, that's no good. Not where I was going to go, but that's actually a good one. So we've got Cardiff Castle. We think about a standard image. So there you go. That sort of typical Cardiff Castle. A sense of order. This keep dominating the landscape. So if we type in that there, there's a few things that spring to mind from the other images that we've seen. So we've got a standard moat, and we could assume that the rest of the castle is the Bailey, yeah. So that means that means that the design that we've got here is not stereotypical Motte and Bailey, because what we looked at a few moments ago, we looked at that. Now, you mentioned that this is the point. You mentioned the we're following the line, with sort of following the philosophy that we've established. Now, one of the things that we said about sort of Roman sites was the idea that you've got a basilica and a forum and gates and roads, and we were basically in that we were saying that everything seemed to be ordered, right? But obviously, as Roman era locations in Britain decayed and changed, you got a sense of disorder. Now, the one thing that we can clearly understand is that the Normans were trying to put their thumbprint on their occupation of Britain, which, in other words, we can go with that idea, that the idea of order, right, rather than disorder. So the one thing that the Normans wished to aspire to was trying to get things ordered and organized throughout the British landscape, right? So the big question, I know Anne's there. Now, it's a really interesting question, Anne, right? And see the importance of the question. What right did the Normans have to say that the British landscape is disordered? Why do they need to organize it? What right did they have to try and place order on a disorganized landscape? Would you actually say, Anne, that the Normans were justified in saying that the world that they lived within when they come over to Britain was disorganized? This is why they had to bring a sense of order. Do you see my point? Is that fair?
Yeah, I think I suppose it was mainly farms, I suppose.
We did have cathedrals. We did have minsters, as it were. Winchester's a fine example of that. And obviously we've got York as well. Okay, we've got other localities.
Like
we go on.
Yeah, I mean, pre-Norman, we've got to look at what we had, and yeah, there probably were of course there were towns and cities, and I don't know. They just wanted walls around them. They just wanted defences, you know, to
A
keep
place,
them
a
separate.
place. Yes, a place that we went to. I don't know if you were there. Were you on the Exeter trip? And we went to the Gateway at Exeter, and I basically said, "Look, this is Anglo-Saxon architecture." Remember that?
Oh, I think so. I can't remember.
But
Long
Bill
time
was on that
ago.
when Bill.
Yeah.
Remember the Gateway in
Yeah,
Exeter?
can remember that, yes.
But that was Anglo-Saxon,
Hmm.
right? So yeah. So the point, the actual point I'm trying to make, right, is getting deeper, and obviously, Bill's right. We are slightly late starting this class. Bill had a couple of problems. We had Zoom was down, so it's been a bit of a disaster. But you know, we don't want to go too much into the next lesson. So what we're going to do, we're going to do another 10 minutes, right? And we can come back to this next week, which would be a good thing. But those 10 minutes I want to spend, right, thinking about even deeper about this Norman landscape on an Anglo-Saxon landscape. And then we've got the other sentiment, which ties us in with the other lecture, where we were thinking about the Roman landscape on an earlier landscape, right? So, you know, this is very, very deep stuff, right? And this is where I wanted to go. And Steve did say hi to everybody, and he's going to be out of action for a little while. He's got some family stuff to deal with, so he'll be back in January. So one thing I wanted to do is actually write in Roman London, right? We're going to chuck in Roman London, right? Which is a bit of a strange thing, right? We're bouncing back and forth, right? You know, I love people who make little maps and plans of London, right? So, you know, this is probably likely or unlikely to the way Roman Londinium was. When I say it either looked like this or it didn't, or if it did look like this, it looked like this at one period in its time frame.
Well,
We can never be sure. Now, what the point I'm making, the point I want to get to, straight to the jugular, is: do we see that Roman order is actually replacing disorder in the landscape? Now, this is one thing that's really important. There are lots of historians and archaeologists, whether they're professional or amateur, right, looking at the question of whether civilization would have developed without the Romans in Britain. And I believe it would have. So that means that when the Romans talk about Britain as being barbarians, backwards, you know, using chariots when nobody else is using chariots, right? They're really painting them as really brutish thugs, which they weren't. In fact, there were lots of Britons that were very, very civilized at the time of Julius Caesar in 56, 55 BC, and at the time of Claudius in 43 AD. Between those 100 years, or more or less, the world of Britain had changed. It could be said it changed and become ordered, right, without the intervention of the Romans. So when we want to go back to this here, hang on a minute, that's just and we want to go out a little bit, right? And we sort of look at the stereotypical, the way that the Normans wish to be seen, right? Now, I'm using lots of things here: wished to be seen. Is this the way things actually were? Now, I'm going to be a sort of bit of a devil's advocate here, right? have we actually got any Norman wooden built structures on the tops of mounds and the interconnection bits and into the Bailey area? The answer is no. Now, it's almost as if those that aspire to be biased and think of the Norman world, and those that aspire to be biased and think of the Roman world, do so at their own peril. It's almost as if they want to ignore anything and everything that's
Yeah.
gone before
Oh
them.
no, that's the next class. Sorry. Yeah, I mean that it did remind me of Coity Castle, actually, that Outer Bailey.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, it's a good subject, you know, to research, because you said, oh, the Dark Ages were not the Dark Ages, they were the Light Ages, meaning Enlightenment and things. But we didn't actually go into the landscape, the sort of made landscape of the Dark Ages before the Normans, so because all we know is that there were Iron Age and then Roman. So
this is the thing, you see. We when we again, the whole point is to sort of follow the line, but I had the book around here. Follow the line, Tim Ingold's book, The Line, right? And it's thinking of the landscape, right? Again, getting to the nitty gritty. The landscape is a lot more complicated than just this, right?
Yeah.
And the landscape is a lot more complicated than just this, right? So what we want to do is simplify the past, and we cannot simplify the past anymore. We simplify the past at our peril, right? So what we've got to do is we've got to start thinking about the narrative of what this is and what this means. So obviously you've got a mound dominating a Bailey, right? This is the stereotypical way the Normans wish to be seen, at the deficit of the entire landscape. Do you know, it's almost as if you go to do GCSE history and you think, well, there was these Normans living in grub huts, right? At the start again, the Anglo-Saxon living in grub huts and the Normans living in these types of things, right?
Yeah.
Is that actually real? Is that's what's going on? And the other thing as well is, right, what we need to do, right? And Richard and Goff, we're just going to do another 3 minutes of this, and then we're going to take a tiny little bit of a break, right? Because there's been problems with Zoom. Zoom has been completely down for whatever reasons, and I was just worried. I was just thinking, oh my God, are we really going to get to it tonight? So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to choose any of these images, right? Just bang that one in there, right? Bang that one in there. Now, when we think about how the landscape is, the landscape is never a single moment in time. It's never one echo of a distant timeline. Now, we think about this sort of Motte and Bailey craze throughout the Norman period, right? And then we start to think, right, we've got a good idea what Motte and Bailey's looked like from the Bayeux Tapestry, right? But the Bayeux Tapestry is not exactly done in 1066. It's done quite a few years later, right? So, we do get illustrations, but one of the points is that the illustrations hide what this true motte and Bailey craze is, right? And this will lead us into next week when we're able, hopefully, to make sure that Zoom is up and running nicely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a note. So next week, yes, we will be starting again. And I'm going to write this down at 5:45 to try and catch up some of this stuff that we're meant to be doing today. Now, the issue I'm getting to now is quite clear. We're now starting to find that lots of these mounds, these mottes, are actually have been there before. They weren't. Some of them weren't actually built by the Normans. They just saw a big mound there, right, and thought, right, let's just chuck something on it.
Yeah.
Now we can't say the same about Silbury Hill, but we can certainly say that about Marlborough. There's a mound in the grounds of Marlborough College, and for years people used to think, oh, it's where the Normans built a mound and plonked a wooden castle on top of it. Actually, the mound had been there for thousands of years before the Normans get there, right? So what we're saying that this is another very good point. The Normans were almost owning the landscape, which were already existed. All they're doing is sticking a wooden tower on top of an existing mound, right?
They took advantage, didn't they? They took advantage of anything.
Yes.
That would
and yes,
raise
they
them
did.
up.
Yeah. Well, one thing that we will do next week is we can look at Kyle-Went, right? Because one thing that we don't do at Kyle-Went is the mound at Kyle-Went, which is a mound that was built directly where a tower is at Kyle-Went. And we're thinking, well, the only real thing we'll come to the end of this session now. The only real thing that that they're doing is just piling up a load of earth around an existing tower. So they're basically empowering themselves and they're being empowered by the landscape. But in fact, what I'm trying to get at is I'm trying to get at this Norman thing. It's not just Norman. The Normans just don't come in and just say, right, we're going to build these things, because some of it's already there, right? So we've got to think it's not as fresh as our history teachers used to tell us. So what we're going to do there now, we're going to see if there's any questions on the line now, right? And then we're going to take a couple of minutes break for me to refresh, and then we're going to go on to the other lecture today. So Bill, have you got any questions on that? Are you going to stay for the next session, Bill?
Oh, I got to go now, Carl. Just one comment.
Okay.
I suppose you can argue that the Roman plan layout was order because it was always in the shape of a geometrical shape, like a playing card. But when it came to Baileys, I think they're different shapes of Baileys, and they probably took advantage of what was in the landscape really to form the outer perimeter of their Bailey. So
Okay.
there was no particular planning, I don't think, with Norman Baileys personally.
Can you
come up with at the time.
Can you take? I'm going to take the first point. And this is exactly got to do with the set of what you just said about the Normans. You've given the overall presumption that all Roman cities and towns were actually sort of this wonderful linear sort of rectangular type shape. But if you look at Kiliva Atrabatum, it's not. If you look at the likes of Londinium, it's not. If you look at Eboracum, it's not. However, in lots of circumstances, it is. So are we saying, I'm not arguing with you, Bill, because there's not an argument there, it's just a point, right? You are right in what you've just said. You're completely right in what you've just said. But are we saying that the other ones that are not built typically in the Roman manner, is that ordered or disordered?
If it's a deliberate action to change the perimeter to what suited the landscape, any obstacles in the way. It's an ordered approach, isn't it? The land would have been surveyed in advance to identify any obstacles, and accordingly, they'd actually form the perimeter of the bailey then to match that, basically.
But when we went to Castor St Edmunds, or in Norfolk, you know the one, that was completely sort of linear. It was completely linear, right? But you go to somewhere like Londinium, it's not. So that's a really, really important point.
Yeah.
In regards to that.
Okay.
Anyway, thanks for that, Bill. There is something that's actually come up online, because we've had somebody watching this online. So the person online, Andrew, we're going to another recording coming up now, because this was a short one, but he's basically said, hi, many ancient British churches are accompanied by a mound nearby. The churches are inevitably named after a local saint who is buried in the mound. This is ignored and labeled Norman. I think that's a really good point. I think what this chap is saying is what I'm saying, is that there's something maybe inevitable in the landscape that Anne mentioned and I mentioned, and we're going to do next week, like Cardiff Castle, that was reoccupied by this Norman presence.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
Anne, anything you'd like to say? Because I know you're going to be staying for this next session, but anything you'd like to say before we finish this bit of the class, and then we'll start again.
No, no, it's just it is worth researching, because I know when I looked at the River Ebu and the small settlement that was around there, associated with Gwentlian, is it? St. Gwentlian? And there was a mound there, and they said it was a burial mound, but it probably wasn't.
But whether it is or it isn't, now this is the point. Whether it is or it isn't, inevitably, the documented landscape is there before sort of the likes of the Normans and so on start to sort of have their dominance. But it's not necessarily a dominance that has only been started by them. So what we're going to do now is Bill, we'll be doing this next week.
Next week now, yeah, okay.
5:54, and thanks for joining us, Bill. So we'll see you then.
Hey, thanks, Dan. Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
Take care, Bill.
Oh, he's gone.
Right,
He's gone.
so guys, what we're going to do, we're going to stop the live recording there now, and what I am going to do then, we're going to stop that now. I just want